Hello and welcome to Love Your Job, Love Your Life podcast. Today I am extremely pleased to introduce to everybody Leisa Docherty. Leisa is an experienced Chief People Officer, and although she's worked across multi-sectors, kind of her main area of expertise is technology, but also with investment companies as well. So where there's been investment in the business, etc. Leisa, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, James, and thanks for inviting me to be part of the podcast. Appreciate
No problem. So we've obviously had some really interesting conversation previously, and some of the stuff that we talked about was really resonated with me.
Yes.
And part of the reason for that being, when I set up Engage to Succeed, just over 12 months ago, I went into it with an aim to keep engagement as simple as I possibly could.
Yeah.
And when I started talking to you about how you approach the role of a CPO, the simplicity things, that's the first thing that came out of your mind, out of your mouth. So
Yeah,
really pleased to hear that, because so often everyone overcomplicates what we do. And that makes it complicated for everybody else in the business. So we touched on that. So do you want to start? Let's just get straight into this, because it's really interesting. You talked about your approach. You have 3 foundational pillars. Do you want to start just by kind of giving a bit of an insight to everybody about what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I would say is, there are commonalities across. I'm working with a number of businesses and investors at the minute, and of course, there's common ground. But I think any business that I work with, there's always a part for individual consideration. Never make assumptions, and find out about where the business is at before you jump in. That said, I do love keeping things simple, James. And I think there are a number of things that I would look at. The first thing is foundations, really, which are often overlooked, or if not overlooked, I think the importance of getting the basics right can be somewhat overlooked sometimes. I always say the most important thing you do in a company is pay people. Yeah. Because if people don't get paid, you've got a really big problem on your hands. Having worked in businesses that have had issues with payroll systems and stuff, getting those foundations right, knowing that you're actually providing a service to customers, your employees or your customers. And I think sometimes that gets a little bit lost. So those foundational pieces, it's never too early to invest in systems. Budgets can often be constraining, especially when you're a growing business, when you're a bit smaller, but it's never too early to do that, and it will really see you in good stead going forward. So I think that whole foundational piece and starting with that is really key. I think the second thing a lot of people talk about, but haven't seen that many great examples of people doing it really well, is aligning people's strategy with the business strategy. Yeah. And I think in my experience, to get that really right takes a lot of time and a lot of hard work in the background. But going back to the simplicity point, if you're in a business and you are looking to develop certain skills with your employees, whatever kind of business that is, it's really easy to explain to people, this is our business strategy, this is where we're headed, this is what we need to do for our customers, and therefore we're going to invest in our people this way. And so, as I say, it's a lot of, I think, stakeholder management, loads of great conversations, and a super commercial people team to understand the business strategy, which is another thing which I think can be overlooked.
Yeah.
So I think that whole piece around being a true enabler for the business and demonstrating how through people you can really support the business in its ambitions is really critical.
And often something that is overlooked, I think, because, I've had quite a few conversations over the past 12 months with businesses, and the people element, that people strategy is the one thing that is often missed out, because people spend so much time focusing on the financials and revenue and profit and margin and all those great things that you need to absolutely have in the background. But that people strategy actually can, in my mind anyway, can often, if you get that right, that secondary financial piece naturally comes, right?
Absolutely. And that kind of brings me on to the third point. Very handy that, thanks, James. We didn't plan this at all, but it does. And that third point is being a great place to work. And people talk about this a lot, but I think if you really mean it and you really demonstrate it and you really listen to your people, then the combination of a genuine people function that leads from the front, that is very au fait with the business and what the business is trying to achieve, coupled with a real desire to be somewhere that people genuinely, on the whole, we all have our bad days, right?
Yeah.
And nowhere's perfect, but on the whole, you think, do you know what? I work for a good company. They treat people in the right way. They listen to what I tell me. I don't always like what they say, but when I feel like it's an open and an honest culture, I feel like we are trying to do the right thing. We might not always get it 100% right, but I think the combination of doing those two things and having that really great people plan and having a real desire and a demonstrated focus on being a great place to work, to your point, you will have more productive people.
Yeah,
You will
yeah,
have happier people.
yeah,
And happier people who are treated like grown-ups, who feel like they're being listened to, who feel like they are being developed, who feel like they can add value, will work harder, will work smarter, will be more productive, and you will make more money.
yeah, yeah,
That's not the only reason to do it, in my view, but you will.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, you will. And it's, the engage to succeed model that I use when I work with clients and individuals. I talk about that a lot, that says, actually, it's not about making sure that everyone is flying high, which is true engagement on the model, because almost that is an impossibility. And I love the fact that you stated there that, not every day is going to be the best day you can ever have, because there are so many factors that influence us as human beings that mean that, it affects our motivation, or something goes wrong and it derails you a little bit. And so therefore it's impossible to be 100% all the time. And it's about actually helping those managers and leaders in an organization and empowering them to actually go,
Absolutely.
it's okay. And actually what we can do, and this is what I do with lots of clients, is it's how do we then help the leaders to say it's okay, and help them to empower their people so they get their people back on track rather than continuing down the derailment line. So really interesting, really interesting. And these, and you talk about these pillars, and there's lots of similarities with my career in recruitment. The foundations are, you've got to get the foundations right when you're leading a big recruitment function, because without them, the whole thing will collapse. But I know that, again, when we talked, Leisa, you talked about you worked with quite a lot of growing businesses and businesses that are going through growth. Why are those pillars so important, and probably even more so in a growing business rather than, and they're important in an established business, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But why are they so important when you're trying to grow and develop and build the business?
Yeah. Well, I think there are lots of reasons, but if I pick out what I think the other key ones, I'm working with a few businesses at the moment that are, less than 100 people. They're not big enough to warrant investing or enable. And it's not the right time to invest in certain things, but you don't always have to have like a Rolls Royce version of everything to start somewhere. So something that I'm finding that particularly investors are very interested in at the moment is really thinking about, okay, we're a business, we're making this amount of money, these are our margins, this is how many people we've got. 3 years from now, we want to be a business that's got an extra 50 people or 100 people. We want to be making another £5 million a year or another £10 million a year, whatever it is. And it's never too soon to start thinking, what will we look like then? And what that enables you to do is, be much more on the front foot. You find so many businesses get to a certain size and it becomes quite cumbersome because you've got hundreds of people and then you're trying to implement systems, processes, ways of doing things. And the bigger you get, the more difficult that is. And it's more difficult to make change, as we all know.
Yeah.
So that's something that I think is critical. Having someone come into a business and say, okay, so when you get to that size, what will that look like from a skills perspective? Are things like artificial intelligence going to play a part? What part's technology going to play? What kind of skills are your people going to need because then you are able to start thinking, okay, so what do we need to think about right now? How can we start planning for that now? What's the organisation going to look like? And how can we develop our talent internally to help us to get to that point? So I think for those businesses, James, that are in that high growth stage, thinking about those things, and things change along the way. That's okay.
Yeah.
To have some key themes that you can start working towards and planning for, and the data that you collect and the way that you act, the measures of how your business is performing in totality, not just revenue and profit, but as a whole, really stands you in good stead for the future.
Yeah. And something again that is often overlooked in these businesses, because you focus on the here and now, and you think you're moving along the right path and you're doing all the right things at that point in time. But actually, as you say, starting to look forward to the future, and even things like skills. If in 5 years' time, what skills do we need? Have we got that now? If we haven't, let's start hiring and again, developing and training and growing internally, rather than having to buy in the expertise, because buying in expertise often costs about £10,000 more than training it and holding on to it internally.
Exactly.
Yeah, very good. And look, also with growth, and as we talk about this, again, I've seen this quite a lot over the course of the last 12 months with clients and people that I've been working with. You get to a certain point, and it varies from business to business. But when you sort of working with smaller businesses, there is this smaller business feel to it, right? It says, everybody's on the same page. We know where we're going. Everyone's actually massively passionate about it because they see the growth, they see the trajectory. But there always becomes a critical point where and it's kind of the same. You get to a critical point where you go from 100 to 150 or 150 to 200. And almost overnight, that sort of sense of, and I don't necessarily like the word family business, but that sense of being one united company can often change.
Yeah.
And that has serious, or can have serious effects from an engagement perspective.
Absolutely.
So, engaging people is challenging in any business in today's world. But when you're in that tipping point, it can be even more challenging. How do you kind of approach that engagement piece with employees as part of that people strategy?
Yeah. This is a really important thing to me. I think, and I'm so passionate about it. And I think when I say it, I think it makes it sound simple. I think simple is one thing, easy is another thing.
Yeah.
And James, you know what? It's all about consistency. So I guarantee if you invest in your middle managers, who are the voice every day to a lot of people in your company, whatever size you are, and that group's only going to get bigger and bigger, you've got to get those people together, whether it's virtually, whatever it is. Those people have got to know what's going on in the company. And when you're smaller, communication's easy, right? Because you're 20 people, in the past you were all in the same place. Even if you're not in the same place, it's super easy to get 20 people on a call compared to 200 people. And the culture starts to change. So investing in those middle managers is really, really important. I think the most important thing, which is just not done well enough, often enough, is internal communication.
Yeah.
And I think people forget that it's an actual skill set. You can't just randomly say to someone, can you now run communications for our company? People train and work for a long time to understand the pitfalls of how, when, what, who in terms of communication. So I think sometimes businesses think, well, we've done that. We've had we've got everyone together. We've had a town hall. Yeah, you need to kind of communicate constantly. And this is where the kind of the consistency piece comes in.
Yeah.
So I think having very strong communications, having very strong middle managers. And then the third piece for me with engagement is, if you really want to know, and I say that for a reason I'll explain, ask people what they think. Be prepared to listen, even if you don't like the answers. And most importantly, tell people what you're going to do or not do about it and why. If you're not prepared to do that, don't ask them. Because then you just lose credibility and people think, well, I've said this and I've told people, in the survey. And to your point about family, because I think that's a really important one. There's been you'll have seen lots of articles about this lately. your employer's not your family. And there's a lot of memes going around about, families don't lay people off and all. But it's true, right? It's business. It's not personal, it's business.
Yeah.
So I share that view. I still think you can make great friends at work. I still think you can have great relationships. I still think that you can really enjoy work, but it isn't your family.
Yeah. And that's why there's no other word that's come to mind yet around it, but I'll think of something. But it's so true because, again, it's like the engagement piece is often overcomplicated by a survey. And what a survey, and this is my view, what a survey doesn't do is it doesn't actually help the individual to engage themselves. All it does is it provides data for the organization to get a feeling and a sense of what's actually happening.
Yeah.
If people tell the truth. Not that I'm skeptical about that piece, but it's something to consider. How many people actually tell the truth, or do they just tell you what you want to hear? But it's consistency after that. Even if you do a survey and then you come up with some actions that you're going to do to improve things, as people have said, that's the one thing that I have always seen throughout my career where it's always fallen over. Because, you get the feedback, you get the data, people say they want, I don't know, more development or whatever it might be. And you go, oh, we're going to do this. And you put an LMS into it, into the company, but then you don't train your managers on how to use the LMS. You don't train the people on how to use the LMS. The managers don't know how to use it, so they don't then help their people to use it. So therefore it falls flat on its face. And it is that consistency of message that says, actually, do you know what? Talk about it regularly, talk about it on like almost weekly, monthly, quarterly, if you want to, but it's that consistent message all the time.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of having those conversations with people to go, actually, how are you feeling today?
Yeah.
And that's why I developed the model, Leisa, because it's like, oh, you're on a roller coaster today. Why are you on a roller coaster? And what support can I give you to help you to get back to flying high? It's that constant communication that helps people really feel like they are part of the business, part of the journey, part of the growth. So it's really, I agree. If you could have weekly engagement conversations and scrap the survey, I think the output of it would be massive.
Yeah, I think that what a survey gives you is data, and what that enables you to do, which is the right thing to do, is get insight. Data on its own is dangerous because I've seen so many people say a piece of data that says X percentage. Oh, well, that department's not as engaged as that department. And I've heard people say, well, that's because of this. And it's like, well, how do you know? Have you asked? Yeah. No. I think the power of a survey, I do like a survey. Not a long survey, James, and not, and not creating survey fatigue, because it gives you data.
Yeah.
And the data enables you to drill down face to face with people and find out what's the real insight. And your point about people feeling whether they can be honest, even if you get out of a focus group that people don't feel they can be honest, that is invaluable insight, right? Because we all know why.
Yeah.
Well, are led to a place where they think, I can't say what I really feel or think.
Yeah.
So, I think you're absolutely right, though. You can't just keep surveying people without actually going into more depth and finding out what the root causes are of things. And not forgetting, continue to do the things that you do really well, that people really like.
And that's the other thing that I often see is that, organizations will almost highlight all of the positives and they'll brush the negatives under the carpet. So when it comes to, and I'm talking bigger businesses here rather than smaller businesses, but rather than actually being brave and tackling the problem areas, they kind of almost go, well, look at how great we are over here. Let's continue working on that because that's really great. But anyway, we could go into a whole
this is a big
rabbit hole of conversation around that one. We've talked about kind of those three foundational pillars. We've talked about kind of the importance of them, engagement, the challenge of engaging people. I was going to ask around future proofing of businesses, but I think actually we've touched on that already with the key things that we've talked about, Leisa. But so I'm going to jump onto this one because you're a CPO and a number of people watching this might be HR business partners, they might be heads of, they might be HR advisors, they might be CFOs. It could be anybody that watches it. And I think there's one thing that I've seen is sometimes the people function sometimes let themselves down a little bit in organizations. And there's a whole reason for that. But where do you see most people functions in your experience of working with the businesses you have done? Where have you seen most people functions falling over when it comes to this work? And why do you think that is?
I think that there's a lot of, I think, misunderstanding about what HR is there to do in today's world.
Yeah.
We've come on leaps and bounds with really great systems and ways to reduce the administrative burden on HR functions. So I think where people functions can fall down is having too much of an administrative burden, which is kind of unseen. And so people think, oh, right, we've got like six big things we want you to do this year, but that day to day can be such an exhaustive burden on functions who aren't able to work smartly enough because they haven't got the right systems and process. So I think that's one thing.
Yeah.
I still think there's a lot of work to do to build the commercial knowledge of HR functions. I see, I've got an amazing network of other CPOs who are very commercial. I think from the conversations I've been having with people, there's still a lot of misunderstanding about what do you mean about a value-add HR function? What does that look like? What do they do that, maybe a little bit more sort of traditional HR functions don't do? So I think having a really good understanding of the business, true business partnering. Business partners have been talked about forever. Yeah. David Ulrich's been talking about it for like decades, right?
Yep.
A lot of businesses still don't do that. And I think, there's also an obligation on businesses and on CPOs to challenge, to say, look, we can do these things, and these are the things that are going to make the biggest difference to our business. We can't do everything, and we're not there to do everything. The leaders and the managers of this business are there. We're all there to work together, right? So a big topic that's, a big buzzword that's been going around for a while now is, high performing culture. Oh, can we have a high performing culture? Could you do that in like 30 days? No. So I think that in a really simple way, by explaining that to get from wherever you are to wherever you want to be, what that's going to take to do that, which comes back to the things we've talked about, James, consistency, communication, managers who are enabled to be able to do the right things, listening to your people, trial and error, systems. This all has to come together. And I have seen it work really well. So it can, but it takes more than just your people function. People function lead it, but it takes a lot of people and effort and time and consistency to get it right.
Yeah. And I totally agree. Having worked in a number of people functions and being privileged to work from a talent acquisition perspective, being privileged to work at the top, reporting into CPOs, it is hard. It's one of probably the hardest functions to, in my opinion, one of the hardest functions to work in, because there is a little bit of a grey line there that says, what should we be doing? And hiring, or from my perspective, it was hiring communities, but I've seen so many other functions feel or almost see the people functions as a dumping area. There's an element of people in that. We'll dump it over into HR or in the people function and let them deal with it. But in actual fact, actually, if a person took ownership of it, and they would create less work for the people function, then give the people function more time to do all this great stuff that we've just been talking about. So it's a fascinating cycle, but I've seen functions fall over for very similar reasons. And it's nice to hear that commercial element, because I think that's been, and certainly I've seen it, is where the people function aren't commercially minded, that can have a real impact on that ability to partner. Because you're almost, the more commercial you are, the more proactive you are. The more proactive you are, the more you're able to partner. The less commercial, the less proactive, and you become just a reactive team that deals with stuff that keeps coming in. So, and there are, that's one of the things with technology that I've seen in the last 12, 18, 24 months is really helping people to
Mm.
make that shift around commercial elements. And, whether that be from when I was developing something the other day, which was what is the true cost of disengagement, and looking at the loss
Mm.
of productivity
Mm.
of people in
Yeah.
different levels. And actually you work that out and you look at the figure and the amount of days lost due to disengagement. And then you've got a commercial conversation, because you're saying no to this, but actually the impact of this will help engagement. And actually, if you increase the level of engagement, you increase productivity, as you talked about earlier. That increase in productivity increases revenue, increase in profit. Why are you moaning about investing £10,000 when you could get £100,000 return out of it?
Yeah.
And it's changing that shift in thinking that helps people to do that.
Yeah. And I think that it works both ways.
Yeah.
So, often if businesses have not had a commercial HR lead, and you start asking questions about net promoter score for customers or about product development or anything, people can be a bit like, why would you be asking that? Do you not just hire people and fire people and do that kind of thing? So I think there is some education as well about, which goes back to this, what does value add HR people, what do they do and what do they bring to the table? And I think whatever leadership role you're in, you have a responsibility to, people talk about difficult conversations. I don't like labeling those type of conversations difficult. They're just conversations, right?
Yeah.
But the most successful businesses I've seen are ones where people are able to have honest conversations.
Yeah.
As a CPO, as any leader, you have to be able to stand up and say, hang on a minute, I think we need to really get to grips with whatever it is and understand this better and be really clear about what we're trying to do and where we really want to invest in our people to, as I said earlier, to be a great place to work, to be a true enabler.
Yeah. And it's so important, and it's a great point to probably finish on, Leisa, because it's, so many people are often scared of saying something in an organization through fear of repercussion.
Mm.
And lots of people that I've spent time with coaching, not only since I set up Engage to Succeed, but throughout my career. And I talk to them about boundaries, and I talk to them about, well, why wouldn't you tell your manager, your boss, your colleagues, whoever it is, about that? And they go, well, because I'm a bit scared about what they might say. I said, well, what's the worst thing they can do? They can say you're wrong and they can not listen to you. But they can't fire you unless you say it in a non-professional way. They're not going to fire you for being honest and open about something that could improve the business, are they? And they go, oh, actually, I've never thought of it like that. And what somebody said to me once, I'm not advocating this, but somebody said to me once, and it was an old boss of mine, said, every day you come to work, I want you to try and get fired. And I said, are you sure? And he said, yeah. He said, why not? Because you'll be honest and you'll be open about what you're doing and how you're doing these things. It made me think about actually that honesty and openness piece. I never did get fired, got made redundant from that job, but I didn't get fired.
Yeah.
But it's just an interesting way to think about it differently, and lots of people aren't. People don't.
Yes, yes.
And
And I think something to finish on, because it's important for the HR community, is, people teams are still employees.
Yep.
Just because they have a responsibility to, help to support making the company a great place to be, they are still employees with their own challenges. So I think as a leader of people functions, you've got to walk the talk. It's not even that. You've got to feel passionately about leading your team and being with your team regularly and giving them an outlet and want people to be open and honest and having those conversations and speaking to your team or your organization about stuff that's deemed to be tricky, like pay or like the engagement score or whatever it might be. Part of being a leader is being able to do the stuff that's deemed difficult and to share, to help to share the burden of what people are finding most challenging in their roles. And that's more important than ever for people teams, I think, particularly what we've seen the last few years, and I'm sure more to come around flexibility and around hybrid and around lots and lots of different things. So, yes, be kind to your people team.
Yeah. And also, people team that are listening, make sure you find time for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other thing that people teams often don't do. They work for others, but they don't find time for themselves.
No,
so that's
and I'm a bad role model for that, and I will put my hands up and say that.
Yeah. Leisa, it's been great talking to you. There's loads of great content here that people can take away. And as I say, whether they're a CPO, whether they're a head of, whether they're a business partner, advisor in the people function, or there's an organization that's looking for growth or looking for a new way to approach how they do things within the people function, there's a load of content. So thank you very much for joining me. It's been great fun. I knew it would be a great conversation. We've gone way over any time expectations that I thought, which is brilliant. It goes like that.
Yeah.
So I've thoroughly enjoyed talking with you. If anyone is watching and wants to talk to Leisa in more detail about any of this content, what I will do is I'll put your LinkedIn profile in the comments and the notes section. So if anyone wants to get in contact and have a more in-depth conversation with Leisa, then obviously connect with her directly. But Leisa, thank you very much for joining. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully there's some stuff in there that's helped people to love their job and therefore love their life more. I'm sure there has. And I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks so much, James. Pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.